From being the #1 player in golf to nearly sabotaging his own league, golf legend Greg Norman reveals why his former friends hate him. Going into business for yourself is always a daunting task. You need backers, a plan, a product, and the ability to bring all the parts together to form a cohesive business. But that's not all. You also have to deal with the competition, and that's precisely what golf legend Greg Norman tried to do when he started LIV Golf. Since its inception, LIV Golf's been mired in controversy, and Norman recently revealed that even those he once considered close friends are now giving him the cold shoulder. And I've gotta say, I'm not at all surprised. LIV Golf's trying to completely restructure and overhaul the way the game is played. Obviously, that's going to ruffle some feathers. So what does this restructuring look like? Let's unpack it. LIV Golf's introducing a new team system, similar to what we see in other professional sports like football and basketball. But unlike football or basketball, in golf, you're not assisted by other teammates during the match. It's just you, your thoughts, and your skills. In professional team-oriented sports like the ones I've just mentioned, contracts are used to signify who deserves what. In the LIV Golf system, what we're seeing are golfers putting on abysmal performances and walking away with lump sums of cash fit for a king. As a result, the majority of golf fans are standing back, scratching their heads, struggling to figure out how the system makes any sense. And I'll save you the suspense. It doesn't. Another reason Norman's former pals aren't too happy with him is that LIV Golf is weakening the PGA, poaching some of the PGA's biggest names, players that fans have been watching for years, and enticing them to cross over with the allure of lucrative contracts and payouts that the PGA simply can't compete with. 15-time major champion Tiger Woods turned down nearly $1 billion to play for LIV. And when asked about his thoughts on Greg Norman, Woods didn't hold any punches, saying, "I think Greg Norman has to go, first of all, and then obviously the litigation against us and then our countersuit against them. Those would then have to be at a stay as well. Then we can talk. We can all talk freely right now as it is." Not right now, not with their leadership, not with Greg there and his animosity toward the tour itself. I don't see that happening. But why would you change anything if you got a lawsuit against you? They sued us first. Woods was referring to a lawsuit that LIV filed against the PGA that's still making its way through the courts, but that's a topic for another day. For some PGA players, the contracts being offered by LIV are simply irresistible. And at least for those players, at the end of the day, it's all about the Benjamins, and honor and loyalty are a distant second. As a result, some PGA fans are turning away from the tournaments they've been tuning in to watch for years. This isn't exactly LIV Golf's fault per se. I mean, the PGA had the opportunity to match or even trump the offers its players received from LIV, so... But many old-school PGA fans don't like change. Nevertheless, the disruption to the status quo is the reason Norman's receiving so much hate. Not only did Greg abandon and turn his back on the PGA, but now he's pulling talent away from his former league. To some observers, it's a huge slap in the face. Others argue that Norman's weakening the fan bases of both leagues, dividing fans, and negatively impacting the viewership on all sides. In a sport that desperately needs new generations of viewers, any division among fans is bound to hit both leagues in the pocket. When you add all these factors up, Norman's demonization should come as no surprise. In fact, something tells me he knew his name would be dragged through the mud and simply didn't care. Why? Because love him or hate him, there's no denying that he's a smart guy, and he knew exactly what he was doing, so... Another thing that's getting under people's skin and sending hate Norman's way is his habit of publicly dissing the PGA. I mean, come on, Greg. Can't we all just get along? Following the official announcement of LIV Golf, people were quick to notice where the league's main source of funding was coming from: the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. For Americans in particular, this was extremely troubling. It's been a long-held belief that the masterminds and financiers behind New York's 9/11 terror attacks were Saudis. Did you know that in recent years, Saudi Arabia has been making multi-million-dollar investments in sports leagues such as the WWE, boxing, horse racing, and motorsports? So their foray into golf came as no surprise. Norman doesn't seem too concerned with Saudi Arabia's connection to 9/11 or their atrocious human rights record. For Greg, all that's perfectly fine, so as long as he keeps lining his pockets. Many fans, however, aren't comfortable watching a league where winners are paid with what some would refer to as blood money. It doesn't matter if you're selling cookies or playing golf for a living. That's not something you want to be attached to your business. And whether you're a fan or not, Norman's biggest field provider is none other than Donald Trump. No matter what end of the political spectrum you find yourself on, for most businesses, having the Trump name attached to your brand will always leave you vulnerable to outside attacks. Recently, Norman was asked about how he felt regarding the brutal dismemberment of a journalist in Saudi Arabia. And a normal human response would have been one of shock, confusion, and horror. But Greg's response essentially amounted to, yeah, and? And when given the details of what his trusty financial backers who could do no wrong had been accused of doing, he downplayed the entire situation, claiming that instead of looking at the bad, we should simply focus on all the good Saudi Arabia's done for their people. Maybe Norman's referring to the fact that in June of 2018, women were finally allowed to drive cars, following a 30-year prohibition. If that's an example of the good Norman's referring to, then I'd argue that the bar he set for the people of Saudi Arabia's quality of living is really low. I mean, talk about turning a blind eye. Not surprisingly, after these comments, people started questioning Norman's moral compass. The internet went into outrage mode, and people couldn't believe what they just heard. Norman had unwittingly unleashed the floodgates, even drawing the ire of multiple human rights organizations, who are now focusing their efforts directly on Norman and Liv. But this didn't cause Norman to back down. In fact, it had quite the opposite effect, and Norman doubled down. He's simply a businessman, earning money for his company, doing damage control and protecting the brand. This was just like back in his playing days, when taking risky opportunities to earn the big bucks. So what's the big deal? There's not a person in business who hasn't done what he's done, and he's determined to get the last word in no matter what. Golf pro Rory McIlroy learned this lesson the hard way. Norman was amused after Rory called him a hypocrite, since Rory left the Euro Tour for the PGA Tour just so he could earn more money. But in all seriousness, leaving a league to join another league for extra money doesn't compare to turning a blind eye to an innocent journalist's gruesome murder, simply because the people who did it fund your league. And it seems everyone except Greg Norman can see why his former friends have turned against him. His betrayal, shady business relations, and shockingly insensitive statements would make anyone question his moral compass. So, from being the #1 player in golf to nearly sabotaging his own league, golf legend Greg Norman revealed why his former friends hate him.